Xi brings hell to China because suspicions that Iran is rearming surfaced right in the middle of Donald Trump's visit to Beijing. This Thursday, May 14, 2026, the pressure fell on Xi Jinping at the most sensitive moment possible. While Trump negotiates face-to-face with the Chinese leader, new information emerges that Chinese companies discussed selling weapons to the Iranian regime and tried to use indirect routes to hide the origin of the material. Washington had already been warning that Beijing could face serious consequences if Chinese weapons reached Iran, and now this suspicion turns into a political trap against Xi. I'll tell you all about it in a moment. But now you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed. Real-time information with the best journalistic quality you've ever seen. The benchmark for credibility, Milson Alves. The accusation that puts China at the center of the crisis is simple. Iran is trying to recover its military strength after the attacks suffered in the war, and Beijing appears as one of the lifelines. This is not just about regular trade. What's at stake involves air defense systems, components for drones, parts related to missiles, and routes used to bypass sanctions. The United States Department of the Treasury stated in April that the Iranian regime was seeking to rebuild its missile production capacity precisely while Washington was trying to deplete those stockpiles. In May, the State Department also announced sanctions against entities linked to Iran's drone and ballistic missile programs. And that's the problem for Xi. China tried to enter this crisis posing as a rational power, a defender of stability and secure trade. But when suspicions of military supply to Iran arise, Beijing stops looking like a mediator and starts looking like an indirect sponsor of Iran's resistance. If Xi wants stability in the Strait of Hormuz, why would Chinese companies be helping the regime that turned this passage into an instrument of blackmail? Iran, according to assessments cited by the international press, still maintains an important part of its missile capability even after the attacks it suffered. There have been reports that Tehran preserved about 70 of its missile arsenal and mobile launchers, as well as access to a good portion of its underground facilities. U.S. Central Command disputed higher numbers and said that certain estimates were not accurate, but did not deny that Iran still has significant capability hidden in underground structures. This is the point that scares Washington. If Iran still has missiles and receives external help to make up for losses, the ceasefire will only come. Uma pausa para o regime respirar. The explosion reported in Shiraz fits into this same climate of suspicion. In the news that's circulating, the city is linked to military structures, underground facilities, and important stockpiles for the Iranian program. Reuters reported that Iran has started allowing certain Chinese ships to pass through the region after reaching an agreement with Beijing on passage management protocols. This is happening while Trump and Xi are discussing the need to keep Hormuz open for energy transportation. The political optics is brutal for Xi. China needs the oil to keep flowing, needs its trade routes to remain open, and needs to avoid the Iranian crisis bringing down its own economy. The White House and Beijing have agreed that no nation should charge tolls in the Strait of Hormuz, according to information provided by the State Department to Reuters. This agreement further highlights the Chinese dilemma. If Beijing agrees that Hormuz should remain free, it becomes difficult to defend, at the same time, any military aid that strengthens Iran's hand in that same passage. Another point weighs against Xi, the very structure of trade between China and Iran. Washington announced new sanctions against networks linked to the shipment of Iranian oil to China, involving people and companies in Hong Kong, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman. The decision came after measures against individuals and companies that would help Iran buy weapons and components used in drones and ballistic missiles. In other words, the problem is an entire mechanism involving oil, money, parts, intermediaries, and routes designed to keep the Iranian regime alive under pressure. But the detail that changes the atmosphere is the accusation that China is helping Tehran rebuild its strength. Trump arrives able to say the world is watching. If China wants to be treated as a responsible power, it needs to stop acting as a shelter for regimes that challenge global roots and use militias, drones, and missiles as tools of pressure. History shows that this problem didn't start today. In the Iran-Iraq War, China had already supplied anti-ship missiles to Iran, including the Silkworm. In 1987, these weapons appeared in attacks against vessels in the Gulf, including ships linked to the United States and Kuwait. The American response was tough, with diplomatic pressure and restrictions on technological exports to Beijing. When China arms Iran in a sensitive region, the problem doesn't stay in Tehran. It comes back to Beijing as a diplomatic, economic, and military cost. This parallel helps to understand the political hell that Xi is facing now. In the past, Beijing could deny it, shift the blame to intermediaries, and say it didn't control the entire route the weapons took. Today, with satellites, maritime tracking, financial sanctions, open source intelligence, and direct pressure from Trump, that margin has become smaller. If Chinese companies use third countries to mask the shipment of weapons, the White House can turn that into evidence of bad faith. If Xi tries to distance himself, he irritates Iran. If he protects Tehran, he picks a direct fight with Washington in the middle of an energy crisis. Other nations have already felt this kind of pressure when they decided to support isolated regimes. North Korea was surrounded by sanctions for selling military technology and missiles. Russia paid the political and economic cost by deepening military cooperation with Iran in drones and munitions. Iran's own network suffered successive blows when its routes for oil parts and financing were exposed by Washington. The difference now is that China is much bigger than these actors, relies much more on global trade, and cannot hide behind the image of a small, cornered nation. Beijing wants to lead the world, but leadership comes with responsibility. That's why the suspicion of sending weapons to Iran weighs so heavily. The Iranian regime wasn't just making an ordinary purchase, it was trying to survive military strangulation, regain attack capability, and maintain its leverage over Hormuz. If China is seen as the provider of this lifeline, it comes onto the radar as an active part of the crisis. And Trump uses this to pressure Xi during the meeting. If Beijing wants oil, market access, and stability, it needs to choose between global trade and the Iranian adventure. Now, the next step should unfold on three fronts. The first is diplomatic, with Trump pressuring Xi during his own visit to Beijing. The second is economic, with new sanctions against companies, banks, maritime operators, and intermediaries linked to Iran. The third is military, with the United States maintaining surveillance over ships, alternative routes, and suspicious Iranian facilities. China may try to buy time, deny direct involvement, and shift the blame to private companies. But the crisis has already moved elsewhere. The hell that once seemed to be só em Teherã chegou a Xi Jinping. I'm Milson Alves, an international affairs specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.